Everybody, this is Two-Way Tonight. Thank you for joining. Why does this program exist? Well, we like to bring you the news, and there's a lot of news to bring you today. We pride ourselves on curating fantastic sound bites, and I watch a lot of other news on cable TV and on the interwebs, and I can tell you, our team here does an extraordinary job of curating what I consider to be the most interesting sound bites. I enjoy this program for just the sound bites we bring you, and morning meeting too. So that's one. News, a great curation of sound bites. Conversation, both great guests, or me to interact with the guests, and then of course to hear your voices. Okay, there's a lot of the reasons to do this. So if you're here on the Two-Way platform, you want to be in the conversation, please raise your hand. Why does Two-Way exist? This program exists also because we think that in a world gone mad, the kind of conversations we have, not just centrist, moderates, and independents, but voices across the spectrum, but all under one roof, conversations like no other, where people can listen and learn. And that's been our mission from the beginning on our political coverage, our political shows. And then subsidiary, right? People like our guest tonight, Drew Holden, Michael LaRosa. No offense meant to them, but I believe they both live within what we call the Beltway, right? And I don't live within the Beltway. I haven't lived in Washington in 3 decades. For those of you who wonder, I call it Sodom and Gomorrah on the Potomac. Voices from all over the country, right? People who watch this show in the run up to the last presidential election, to a person, have said to me, I knew Trump was probably going to win because we heard voices from all over the country explaining why they'd previously voted for Democrats, they were voting for Trump. To hear voices from all over, unfiltered by media, often liberally biased media, to understand what's going on, right? So if you live inside the Beltway, or your biorhythms for information and news are elite or fervent and frequent, if you're watching cable news, if you're on Twitter, etc., sometimes you think, well, all anybody's talking about is Jimmy Kimmel, or all anybody's talking about is Charlie Kirk, or all anybody's talking about is what happened in Dallas today, or all anybody's talking about is Donald Trump's latest post on Truth Social. And then sometimes you learn, no, actually, this is a preoccupation of the Drew Holdens of the world. I'm kidding, Drew, because Drew is actually better about thinking about real people than almost anybody I know who lives inside the Beltway. But you think, well, this is a preoccupation of MSNBC and Fox, and it's not a real thing. Okay. So this is a very fraught time. What happened in Dallas today, shooting of an ICE facility, what happened to Charlie Kirk, what happened in New Hampshire, it's gotten almost no coverage. It's kind of mind-boggling, and other things that have happened. Right, a very fraught time. So, and let's be honest. Washington Post now reporting James Comey is going to be indicted. Very fraught time, right? Stuff happens every day, and this was true before Donald Trump, but certainly in the last 10 years, we're in a very fraught and divided time. But it's tempting to think it's even more fraught than it is, because if your life is about cable news and Twitter, you're not realizing that most people are not paying attention to most of this. Okay, that's a big wind-up to this. New Quinnipiac poll is number 10, please. Okay, the new Quinnipiac poll, national poll, and it suggests that what's going on now is not a preoccupation of elites or news junkies. Quinnipiac national poll, nearly 8 in 10 voters say the United States is in a political crisis. Now it's 79% of all voters. Democrats, 93% of Democrats say the country's in a political crisis. That's a lot. Independents, 84%. 60% of Republicans. Now, it's lower for Republicans. Because they have the White House, would be my guess. They don't want to say Donald Trump's America's in crisis. But 84% of independents say the country's in a political crisis. That's not just viewers of cable news and Twitter. Almost everything we're going to go through tonight on video and with our guests is stoking this political crisis. There you see a graphic of this. Look at that. 80% overall, 93% of Democrats in a political crisis. Now, people can obviously define political crisis different ways, but this is a very, fraud is too weak a word. This is a very rough time for America. So, shooting in Dallas, the absolute hypocrisy of the liberal media, and I'm so glad Drew is here. The absolute hypocrisy of the liberal media, matched by hypocrisy on Republicans, who all of a sudden are for cancellation and censoring. But the difference is the Democrats have the media on their side. So it's 2-on-1. That's the difference. It's an asymmetrical difference. But the hypocrisy on the right bothers me too. Then Kamala Harris's book, really more dividing Democrats. J.D. Vance in North Carolina today, saying a lot of stuff. And then, of course, the prospect of a government shutdown. President Trump yesterday canceling a scheduled meeting for tomorrow with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. And unlike some of this stuff, which doesn't really affect the real lives of real people, a government shutdown would. The inability of the two sides to come together, which they'll have to do because they need 60 votes in the Senate. So they need some Democratic votes. This level of division, this anger, the 0 to 60 and outrage. I don't know if you guys ever watched The Five on Fox. I was just watching as I was preparing. Man, that is a fraught conversation. Keep using the word. And again, it's too weak a word. This is an incredible time. And we don't know the facts of what happened in Dallas. But what we do know is the Trump administration is claiming it was an anti-ICE person who shot. Now, the FBI director, put this up, please. Number 2, Kash Patel put out on Twitter a shell casing that he says shows anti-ICE on one of the unused shell casings from the alleged shooter. Now, I'm an old school journalist. If the government says something, I don't just say it's true. And I say that about Republican and Democratic administrations. I'm just an old school journalist. I just don't believe in just saying if the government says it's true, because governments lie, particularly during wartime. Early, when one of the first controversies I stirred up immediately after 9/11, I said, I forget in what forum I said it, but I said, governments lie during war. All governments lie during war. It's what they do. And so even though the country's been hit, and I live 4 miles from ground zero, even though the country's been hit, the press has to be on guard. Because government's like, we're in a war right now. It's a civil war here at home. And so I'm not saying Kash Patel's lying. I'm just saying I don't automatically say those are real shell casings. I don't automatically say that because they're shell casings that the guy who did it is of the left. I just don't automatically say it. I'd rather we all wait. We still don't know the motivation of the person who tried to kill President Trump at Butler. Okay? A lot we don't know. But what we do know is that from Dallas to Utah to New Hampshire to Jim Comey being indicted reportedly to war over Jimmy Kimmel, what we do know is this is a really divided country. And while it's been really divided for a long time, the assassination of Charlie Kirk in particular has elevated this to a new level. It's elevated to a level that I have not experienced, and I've been covering this exact topic almost my entire career. And again, certainly for the last decade, because of Donald Trump and his polarizing ways. Man, okay. We're going to bring in our 2 guests. I'm going to show them a bunch of sound bites. We'll talk through the news, and we won't get to everything I want to get to, because I also want to get to your questions. And we'll do that. Love for you, if you're here on the two-way platform, to raise your hand and be ready to say where you are and what's on your mind. I will also say, no smack in the chat. I don't know why you feel you want to come to this platform and put smack in the chat. It's just not the right thing to do. Spirited debate, conversation, even criticism, fine. But to go in there and to say, if someone says something who's a liberal, oh my God, I can't believe there's a liberal on the show, I'll never watch again, and to say something negative, personal attack on them, or someone MAGA to come on, same thing. Just, I don't understand that mentality, particularly here. So let's try to have a smack-free night. Peace, love, and understanding, even in the chat. That would be delightful. Delightful. All right. Bring in our guests in a moment. Quick word from one of our sponsors. one of my favorite sponsors, those of you who've listened to the program know before, that even in the midst of all of this uncertainty and anger, hostility, and assassination, nothing more important than comfort. Cozy Earth. You can get a big discount on Cozy Earth products right now. In fact, you're not going to believe how much. 40% off pants, bedding, shirts, everything. 40% off. CozyEarth.com. Use the code two-way. And again, buy whatever you want there. You know, my strongest recommendation to you is the pants. Cozy Earth products. This is made from bamboo. Extremely comfortable, extremely nice looking stuff. You can wear it anywhere. And I tell you, I take the sheets out sometimes. So I have two sets. One's on the bed, one's in the closet. Sometimes I'll just grab an extra sheet, sit with it on the couch because it's so soft, so nice. Built for real life, made to keep up with yours. Cozy Earth. Again, CozyEarth.com, 40% off. Use the code two-way for 40% off. All right. Here comes Drew Holden. And I probably shouldn't reveal this, but Drew inadvertently sent me a DM. He meant to send someone else about me. And he said, I think Mark's lost his fucking mind. No, just kidding. Drew didn't do that. But that could have happened. Totally could have happened. Gentlemen, welcome in. I'm glad to see you both smile. And I'm glad you're both here because you are genial and principled people who will get me through this hour without going stark raising mad, even though I am on the precipice, as everyone can tell. Michael, what is your take? Thank you for being here. What is your take on just my overall sensibility that something's gone more awry than even usual in the last couple of weeks? Am I right or am I overreacting?
I don't know. You're not wrong, but I guess my question, because I was thinking about what you were saying, and I want to ask you, because you said that Charlie Kirk kind of brought this on. Am I correct? And I want to know why you think that is why we are here versus, and why it wasn't like the triple murder of like a politician and her family. And if it's because of celebrity, then are we actually in anything very new? Is celebrity what's going to determine the crisis that we are in, the level of celebrity? Because that was a real political murder with a political hit list. I mean, not that Charlie Kirk wasn't, but this did happen a couple of months ago. So I guess I'm wondering, what is the difference?
You talking about Minnesota?
Yeah, the Minnesota House Speaker, her husband, and her dog, who I count as
it's certainly part of the conversation. I don't mean to minimize that, obviously, at all. I think
no, I know you don't, but it's part of what's going on.
So celebrity is part of it. The fact that it was a public event, you know, we've not seen graphically what happened in that house in Minnesota. We just haven't seen it, right? So it's less vivid. But we hadn't heard of her and her dog and her husband before she was killed, right? So she doesn't really mean anything to us as a society. Again, I'm not minimizing her death. It's horrible. But there's no national connection to her. She didn't have tens of millions of people connected to her.
No, I know, but that is kind of a shame, though, only because she was a public servant and she was killed in the name of public service. She was killed in the name of her service.
100%. I will say this. Here's a reason, which is not a good reason, right? I'm talking about the difference between what is and what ought to be.
Yeah.
The left did not try to make that into a national conversation about the evils of the right and the verbal and violent excesses of the right. Your side just didn't do that, and you can speculate as to why. But from the day Charlie Kirk was killed, the right has made it their business to say there's blood on the hands of the left. I don't know why your party didn't do that in that case, but I think that's a big part of it.
I think you're right.
So it's all those things. But again, I struggle with this so much, and then Drew's going to weigh in on my thesis. again, I go back. We don't know the motive of the assassin in Butler.
Right.
Like all of this jumping to conclusion about the meaning of different assassination attempts or assassinations. We just don't know enough about the people.
Do you think it's fair that there's a lot of, on one network, there's a lot of they did this and they did this, a lot of they, and like, what do you make of that? Because that is making things a lot worse.
I'm not into it, but I'm also not minimizing it, because, and this goes back, and this is where Drew will be so useful to the media. This 2-on-1 thing is such a big deal. It's such a big deal. And Michael, your party, you're one of the people who understands this. The 2-on-1 thing, you know, most people in your party won't admit the 2-on-1 thing.
But, oh no, yeah.
But the 2-on-1 thing really causes people in red media to say they, because it's like a cry in the wilderness. Like the media is not going to tell you this, so we have to.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. I've said this several times, and Drew, thank you for your patience. Let me just make one more point, and then you talk as long as you want. Charlie Kirk had the right not screamed, the press would not have covered it, and they still did not cover it commensurate to how they should have, or the way they should have. You know, half the coverage in the New York Times is about what a bad guy Charlie Kirk is, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, Drew, go wherever you want, but start, and thank you for being here. Start with this question of, are we in the midst of something that's escalated beyond what we've experienced for the last 10 years, or am I overreacting?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I think there's a couple of things going on here. One, to your point about the media, I think one of the reasons why this has alarmed so many people, has triggered this kind of national conversation we're having about political violence and violence in society and all the ways all these things intersect, is that broad strokes of the American public don't trust the people whose role it is to provide the lens onto what's happening and why it matters to do that well. And I think there's a lot of anger and a lot of frustration, maybe sometimes misplaced, certainly, right? I'm one of the first, I think, on my side to throw up my hands and say, hey, enemy of the people is not a helpful phrase, right? Like we should be trying to engineer a better media. And I think our frustration should drive us to that. But I think people are so mad and they're so fed up that it's a reason that they're kicking over tables, and it's a reason that they're so upset, and it's a reason why it's effective in forcing the conversation of, why is this happening? Why is someone shot dead in front of a giant crowd of college students for his opinions, even if folks don't agree with those opinions, right? Setting aside the merits of the opinions, why does that happen in our country? And this takes me to a point that I've kind of been chewing on for a couple of days. I'm not positive I'm right on it, but I think one of the reasons why Kirk's assassination has triggered such a nerve in a way that the killings in Minnesota didn't, and quite frankly, even that the attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Butler didn't, is that there's something specifically alarming when it is an activist or a non-elected politician. I think, and this is going to come off as maybe a little crass or maybe a little unfeeling, but there's almost something bound up in seeking public office, that there are other sacrifices you'll have to make, that things could go sideways, that things could go bad. That shouldn't be the case. So from a moral lens, I obviously do not think that is reasonable and that should be the case. But I think people expect more when those sorts of awful, tragic things happen. And I saw someone in the chat had mentioned, Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. I know he had already been elected, but Bobby Kennedy's assassination in '68. When you look at these events of, right, Harvey, like when you look at these events where you have someone who is killed not for their overawing political decisions, not for the things that they have done that many people might be very upset with, but for their words, I think that strikes a different type of nerve. And I think on the right in particular, it struck a serious nerve, because there are lots of people, I think, who are people like me, who are conservatives, who have lots of opinions that they're usually very comfortable to share in all sorts of audiences that may not feel the same way, that are more on the defensive, right? I am very milquetoast, I think, when it comes to a lot of punchy, big, divisive political issues. I am not a fire breather. I'm not a firebrand. I'm not very smash mouth. I think for people who are a little bit closer to that edge, it's got to be really, really alarming that someone who they look at and see that is the best version of what I could be doing, and they were killed in public as a result of doing that.
Right. Well said. All right. We're going to break format a little bit because I want to get to your questions, but I also want to show you a bunch of stuff. So, gentlemen, just watch along with me. I'm just going to run through stuff in a newscast as briskly as I can. The vice president was in North Carolina, and he has become a potty-mouthed, aggressive warrior for his side, taking on Democrats both generally and specifically. Here's the vice president talking about the shooting in Dallas. This is number 4, please.
And I think that is the most disgusting thing. The very people who keep us safe ought to be honored and protected and praised by Democrats and Republicans alike. It is time to stop the rhetorical assault on law enforcement. Because here's what happens. Because here's what happens when Democrats, like Gavin Newsom did, say that these people are part of an authoritarian government. When the left-wing media lies about what they're doing, when they lie about who they're arresting, when they lie about the actual job of law enforcement, what they're doing is encouraging crazy people to go and commit violence. You don't have to agree with my immigration policies. You don't have to agree with Donald Trump's immigration policies. But if your political rhetoric encourages violence against our law enforcement, you can go straight to hell, and you have no place in the political conversation of the United States of America.
Okay, so Gavin Newsom, who's in New York, he was at the Clinton Global Initiative and some New York Times environmental event, took time to go on social, or his team did. Number 5, please, to respond to the vice president name-checking him. He decided to name-check the vice president right back on X, I believe, and he said, that's a little hard for me to read, I got to say.
No thanks, JD. I will not be going straight to hell today. Though when I watch you speak, I certainly feel like I'm already there.
There you go. Okay. The president, Truth Social, also talked about these bullets, the casings, and said the leftists did it. And here is the vice president, number 7, vowing that the Trump administration will dismantle violent liberal networks. Number 7, please.
So here's my sacred obligation to you, to all the law enforcement, but every person, whether they wear a uniform or not. Over the next couple of years, the Trump administration is going to do everything that we can to dismantle the networks, to destroy the funding, and to make it harder for people to kill one another just because they disagree with what somebody says. That is what we're going to do. We're going to fight for it.
All right. Hold on. Okay. Next. Ted Cruz, of course, is from Texas, represents the people of Texas, was at the press conference this morning after the shooting, said a lot of stuff. Here he is, again, on the same theme as the vice president on the left, demonizing ICE. And there's no doubt, it's just objective fact. A lot of prominent Democratic politicians have criticized ICE, called for the abolition of ICE, criticized the tactics of ICE officers, used rhetoric about ICE officials that has been highly critical and negative. Here's Ted Cruz, number 9, please.
2 weeks ago today that we saw a political assassination in Utah that tore the heart out of much of this country. This is the 3rd shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop. To every politician who is using rhetoric demonizing ICE and demonizing CBP, stop. To every politician demanding that ICE agents be doxxed and calling for people to go after their families, stop. This has very real consequences. Look, in America, we disagree. That's fine. That's the democratic process. But your political opponents are not Nazis. We need to learn to work together without demonizing each other, without attacking each other. And I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the brave men and women of law enforcement. I want to say thank you to the brave men and women of ICE and CBP and everyone who puts their lives on the line to keep us safe.
Okay, he dropped out
The
of this.
divisive
Again, this is a great example of 2-on-1. The press coverage of ICE during the Trump administration has been hostile. It has been, the Democrats are right. They're doing extreme things. They're disrupting communities. They're using excessive force. They're not at all sympathetic to the notion that Ted Cruz and the vice president talked about of their officers being doxxed. The press has just got one perspective on that. Same with Kimmel. Okay, so Kimmel did what he did last night. Not a lot of developments today. Here's one, number 15, Next Star, one of the two stations that had not been said it would not air Kimmel. Said today they'll continue to talk to ABC, but as of now, New York Post headline: Next Star doubles down on Jimmy Kimmel Live blackout after host's tearful non-apology. So the right's perspective on Kimmel was, and this came from Charlie Kirk's organization, not supportive of what he did, insufficient, angry at what he said, and some people still saying he should be fired. The left's position and the media's position summed up in here's a headline from Hollywood Reporter, number 14. This is the media, number 14, is very representative of a different point of view. Critics Notebook: Jimmy Kimmel met them with his powerful tightrope walking monologue. Okay, now we're going to talk for a minute now here. Well, let's Polymarket one thing. Our friend Polymarket, again, a betting market where you can go on and folks can put down their bets about certain outcomes, certain events. The Polymarket, the question: will Kimmel apologize by the end of the week? Who did not say he was sorry yesterday. You can go ahead and put that up. That's number 17. 9% chance that he'll apologize by the end of the week, according to Polymarket. Okay. Now, there's a media reporter named Brian Stelter. Well, everybody on here is well aware. Brian Stelter, he worked for CNN. CNN fired him. CNN brought him back. And for many on the right, Brian Stelter is representative of an extraordinary level of bias. Now, many reporters in the dominant media at places like CNN are biased, but for people like me and Drew, it's particularly galling that the media reporter, who's supposed to be covering the media objectively, when that person is biased, it's an extra layer of bias that's just extraordinary. And while many media reporters are biased for the left, this person is particularly insidious. Here he is. And Drew has highlighted this. We borrowed from Drew's work here. Here he is, 12B. This is Brian Stelter's headline over his piece. He's very upset at the notion that someone would be canceled off a program or suspended for what they said. Right? Trump's anti-media blitz that led to Kimmel's suspension is straight from a European strongman's playbook. So here's Brian Stelter on the current question of a government person threatening. Here's Brian Stelter several years ago when Lou Dobbs was fired for what he said. 12C.
But let's begin by going behind the scenes of Fox's surprise ouster of Lou Dobbs. It's not cancel culture here. It is consequence culture. What are the consequences for riling up people with reckless lies about a democracy that most Americans cherish? Well, lately there have not been many consequences, but maybe that's changing. Maybe.
Drew, explain the place that Brian Stelter holds amongst conservatives who see liberal media bias.
Yeah, so I think Stelter sometimes is almost a cartoon of himself, right? I think he is very opinionated, dramatically opinionated, but he does this thing that I think I try to point out a lot on X and on other places on your program, Mark, that is, I think, a way too apparent phenomena within the media, where Stelter seems to wake up every morning and it is as if the entirety of human existence has not happened. And he begins afresh. And he thinks about his political priorities. He thinks about the things that matter to him in that moment. And all of a sudden, he dials it up to 12 and says, this is it. Be alarmed. this is right. Don't be alarmed. And without fail, right? I spend a lot of time looking at hypocrisy and people kind of speaking out of both sides of their mouth, whether or not it's about their particular political team or issue or person. And Stelter is the spitting image of what I look for when I put together these hypocrisy points, because on every single issue, he manages to just nail it almost perfectly, almost flawlessly, right? And so you mentioned the consequence culture, which I think is a really excellent clip. He had another quote during COVID and the suppression of media online during COVID that he thought was just the grandest thing in the world. If you're reducing a liar's reach, you're not undermining free speech. You're simply doing what needs to be done. And it's always this way. There are no principles. It is beyond principled. I almost hope he's in on the joke.
Yeah. Michael, do people, well, forget people. Do you understand why the right feels so strongly about Brian Stelter's bias?
Yep. Yeah, I do, because I've felt it myself over the last year and a half. Probably, the last year and a half, I would say, since 2023 was when I started to see for myself. And I think it probably had to do with learning the hard way from my own experiences, from what happens when you speak out. CNN.
Well, I'll just put a sharper point on this. Michael became a critic of a Democratic administration, still a Democrat, still a loyal Democrat, but was seen as a threat to the health and political health of Democrats. And so Brian Stelter and his network turned against Michael because he was no longer on the home team. Kind of incredible.
Yeah. It was the first time I experienced anything like it. And then, I worked at MSNBC. I was a producer. I get it, but it is when I see people like a business reporter like a Stephanie Rule get the exclusive interview with Kamala Harris the day she rolls out her economic speech, and not one time does she ask her anything about how she's going to pay for this thing or anything. It was like, how can you call yourself a journalist and go on Today's Show and talk about economics when you only care about economics when the economy is doing bad under a Republican and good under a Democrat? I've seen things like that, but Brian doesn't cover that stuff. He didn't cover much of Joe Biden's absence from the media, from giving press conference, from giving press avails, from giving press conferences. I don't remember him doing a big thing about Kamala Harris taking 8 weeks to do an interview that she didn't even do alone.
Those are two great examples. He would occasionally mention them, but had it been a Republican, it would have been a daily drumbeat.
No, it's all Trump stuff with Brian, and that's what makes me sad, because it's so obvious that he's missing so much that he could be covering, but he chooses not. He didn't cover when Joe Malone a couple weeks ago. Did you see that thing with Joe Malone that came out and said how CNN is just has all these problems with liberals at their network? He didn't say a thing about a chairman of his own company.
Amazing. All right. We're gonna get to two more things and then your questions. Again, please raise your hand if you're on the platform, you want to be in the conversation. And Michael, the second one's going to be your piece that you wrote for foxnews.com. Shutdown. There may be a government shutdown. And part of why Republicans traditionally lose the politics of shutdowns is because the press sides against them. The president, New York Times headline number 21, shutdown tests Trump's go it alone approach. The New York Times says, and it's true that the president has spent his first month, as the New York Times subhead says, his first months in office freezing out Democrats who in turn have opposed him routinely. Now they need each other to keep the government open. And the president's the president, right? You can't say the Democrats have no blame here, but he is the president and he's going to have to figure this out. Let's polymarket this. Polymarket folks say, will there be a government shutdown by October 1? What are the wagers on Polymarket say, will there be a shutdown? 63% say yes. And as you can see, it went up a few days ago and now it's moved around over the last couple of days, but it's still at a pretty high point at 63%. We shall see. All right, Michael, number 18. Michael, you wrote a piece on foxnews.com, and rather than using the old standby of media reference or movie reference to election, you went with Mean Girls. I'll read from Michael's piece, and then you'll tell us why you wrote it. Inside the White House, the Regina Georges of Biden's inner circle ruled like mean girls and policed loyalty. Staff weren't serving a president and first lady. They were serving a cult. You never knew when Regina was in charge or when the Bidens were. It was all blurred. Joe and Joe Biden were warm, decent, empathetic, but they enabled some of the nastiest and most mean-spirited people I've ever encountered in politics. The contradiction defines the Biden era. Do we have a second screen here? Yeah. Biden's bullies dragged him down and tried to drag Harris down with him. Now they're out for her again. Recently, we saw a glimpse of that vindictiveness when a few of my former teammates reacted with ugly and, of course, blind quotes to the release of Harris's book excerpts. Michael, I agree with you, but I have two bones to pick with you, which I'll pick in a moment. But tell people why you wrote the piece.
Sure. So I wrote it because after the excerpts were released from Kamala Harris's book, a few of the things she said, I really just identified with. Like I identified with what she was saying about how she was treated, and the things that people inside the White House, inside the Biden campaign were doing, and to push her down or to I mean, look, there was a lot of things that were done to them that were not helpful, that were directed specifically at the vice president, it sounds like. And but from the way she talked about her experience, my experience felt really similar. And I felt like I might as well just talk about some of this stuff out loud.
Yeah. All right. Again, I agree with you about the mean girls. I know who you're talking about, and I agree with you. But here are the two bones I want to pick with you. First of all, in terms of the vice president, I think a part of what she's doing, though, is rewriting history. And she's not been particularly kind in the book to some of her fellow Democrats. So I don't think you can say that she's blameless here for what happened to her. I think she was treated.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
Okay. But here's the other thing. And this is in my opinion. This is a fact. You write what nice, kind, decent people the Bidens are. In my understanding and talking to many sources for decades, the Bidens treat a lot of their staff very poorly.
That's fair.
Is that not true?
It's fair.
Yeah.
It's fair. I'm speaking about my own experience here. My op-ed. They treated me. They treated me very well.
And they treat some people who are favored very
well. Look,
well.
I was inside that traveling bubble, and that's a very different place. It's much smaller. It's more familiar. Specifically when you're working for the spouse. I think Richard Ben Kramer called it the better bubble. And it definitely was. Yeah. Jill Biden was very mom-like. And I still love her. And sometimes I cry thinking about her because she doesn't deserve all this. Yeah. But at the same time, like the vice president said, I really struggle with some resentment and disappointment and about some of the enabling they did of some really bad people who advise them poorly, who they won't get rid of for some reason, even though their legacy keeps getting worse by the day. They still won't let go of these people. And I was really disappointed because, you know what, Mark, as a mom, when she saw what her husband's staff tried to go after me and do and smear me the way that her son has smeared, I saw her tears. Like I saw them. And I wish she could have seen my own mother's tears when they did this awful. There's people like Andrew Bates and Kelsey Donahue and TJ Ducklow when they came after me just because I said, why is Biden not doing interviews? For a couple months, I was consistent. I didn't understand why they were whining about polls and they were disengaging from the public. I didn't understand it. But it wasn't my job to flack for them either. I
hear you. Very well said. Go to foxnews.com, read Michael's piece. It's really excellent. All right. 2 words from sponsors and then your questions. I want to get Drew and Michael as much time with you all as we can. So stand by, hands up if you want to be in the conversation. First of all, if you want to follow what's going to happen with the shutdown and its impact on the economy, no better place to do it than in David Bonson's newsletter. Comes out 5 days a week. It's absolutely free. I read it every day. It's called Dividend Cafe. Go to tway.tv/TBG, the Bonson Group, tway.tv/TBG. Sign up for Dividend Cafe. We did a great session with David today, focusing on housing, supply and cost and everything else. He's as good on the economy as anyone I know, and it's a great newsletter. Shows up in your inbox daily. Again, Dividend Cafe, tway.tv/TBG. And then finally, one more word for one more sponsor, and then your questions. And it's CB Distillery. At a time of all this fraught stuff, some people might have trouble sleeping. And if you don't sleep, that's no good. That puts you in a bad place for the next day. So try the products from CB Distillery. They can make a real difference, not just for sleep, but for soreness after working out, stress, mood. For some people, this is the answer. Focus. Their products, highest quality CBD, clean ingredients, no fillers, just premium CBD. Imagine being able to wake up 2 million people, more than 2 million people, trust the products from CB Distillery. And right now you can try them at a 25% discount if you use the discount code two-way, promo code two-way. Go to cbdistillery.com, choose what you like there, use the promo code two-way, cbdistillery.com. You get 25% off your full order. If you're looking for a sleep solution, and very few of us are not, give it a try. Again, over 2 million people have. Two-way is the promo code, cbdistillery.com. All right. Come on in, folks. Tell people where you are in case they don't know what's on your mind for Drew and for Michael. And we start with Joseph. Joseph, unmute if you would. There you go. Welcome in.
You hear me? Thank you. I just had a question and a comment. I'm really struggling with trying to, in the spirit of the show, of peace, love, and understanding, understand, I guess, the left, maybe more progressives, their inability to monitor their side, I'd say. I understand that, stuff people say online and the chats, that's, a lot of telephone tough guy stuff. But when I see stuff like Ilhan Omar, for example, and some of the other stuff, I don't understand, why are they so scared to just tell one of their own to just be quiet? Like, why did nobody come out and just say, now's not the time for that, specifically that? Because from my angle, it's like I'm trying so hard to understand, because I know people don't understand where I may come from or why I think certain things. Some of it's hardwired, some of it's how I was brought up. But I don't understand, what are they so scared of? Why wouldn't somebody not come out and just say, hey, don't say that right now. It's a really bad time, and say it publicly. I know Caitlin Collins struggled to go back and forth, and it's just out of decency. Why will nobody just say, just stop? It doesn't make sense. It's almost like by not saying anything, they're kind of co-signing it, and it doesn't. I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, Joseph, it's a great question. Drew, and then Michael.
Yeah, my worry is that a lot of people are just chasing headlines, right? That they see it as political cachet to stand up and be the most upset person about what Trump is doing, and the most upset person about what conservatives and the right are doing, and that sucks, right? That's a really horrible kind of fundamental dynamic of what's driving it. But and I also think it's wrong. I think at the end of the day, people should the people are overcommitted to the pursuit of those headlines and what benefits they actually get from them in politics and otherwise. But I think that's the calculus, and it's a narrow and it's a cheap and it's a lousy calculus. But that's the only thing I can think of.
Well said, Drew. Michael.
Part of it is what Drew said. I think provocation. Part of it is, look, I think Democrats might do things a little bit differently in Congress. I think right now Republicans are just very united, even the ones that are in very marginal districts who will probably lose some of their seats because they had to vote with President Trump. Pelosi and Jeffries continues the culture. They really don't do that. They go to Democrats and say, look, you need to be with them on this because this is where your district is, and this is this is how you represent them best. And I'm not making excuses. I think Democratic leadership would be thought of more favorably if they did exactly what you said and called her out. But they won't, because she's a grown woman. 800,000 people have chosen to elect her. And my view is, and I say this about Trump and his use of executive authority and the FCC and Disney, if people don't like it, they have the opportunity to punish these people. But there has to be enough of the people that they represent to really make that choice. Leadership doesn't always feel like it's their responsibility to punish their members. Maybe they should.
Yeah, very well said also. Joseph, thank you. Great question. Peter, welcome in. tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind for Drew and for Michael.
Thank you for calling on me. It's the first time I ever raised my hand. So I'm in
We're
Franklin,
glad to have
Tennessee.
you here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Franklin, Tennessee. I guess since Charlie got shot, you talked a lot about, the asymmetrical nature of sort of the discussion and I guess culture in large, right? Like how the left owns most of media, Hollywood, academia, that type of thing. My my sort of thought, and then just like sort of my priors, like I was raised by two, I wouldn't call progressive parents, but like liberal Democrats, like they've always voted Democrat. I voted for Obama because I didn't like know any better. I didn't follow politics at the time. Um, I didn't vote for Trump in 16, but mainly because I was deployed. I was in the Navy and I still really wasn't following politics that closely at the time. And then COVID happened. I was living in Southern California at the time. And that sort of, quote unquote, radicalized me as like, someone that leans way more to the right. I, you know, I couldn't stand what was happening in Southern California with COVID. So I voted for Trump in, 20 and 24. But going back to the asymmetrical nature of information in our culture, like I can talk politics all day long with my mom. We have very civil discourse. I've been like begging her to listen to your show, and she's listened to a couple, but she's not much of a YouTube person. But how? My question is, how do we like or the right change that? Like, I mean, I remember I grew up listening to like Terry Gross and NPR on, the evening when my parents were cooking dinner. The methods and avenues for information in today's world is like you could be next door neighbors with somebody, and like if you're taking in information from, two totally different sources, you will not have any sort of similar footing. And I really for the people on the right, like you just don't have that. I don't know. There's just not as many outlets. You really have to go seek it.
Yeah, Pete, everything you're saying is true. When you say how do we change it? What do you want to change? You want to change the way people consume news? You want to change the fact that there's red and blue silos? What is it you're looking to change?
Yeah, I guess red and blue silos, and if you only watch Fox News or listen to Ben Shapiro, then you're only going to get one side. Or if you only listen to NPR and MSNBC.
My answer's two-way, but I've got a tunnel vision on that. Michael, what are some ideas you have about try to get us less siloed in terms of information?
Well, look, it's platforms like this. Obviously, people willing to go to places that maybe are where there's going to be either disagreement or civilized discourse. But like, it's really interesting because Mark, I agree with everything Mark says about the legacy mainstream media. It's totally true. But if you talk, and I don't know who talks to who, but like I still talk to a lot of people on the left. And if you read like really smart people who I consider to be really smart on my side, like a Dan Pfeiffer, or listen to like a Nicole Wallace, who I really, really respect, who used to be a Republican, but she's really not anymore. They believe that it's the left who has the advantage when it comes to media infrastructure. And they truly, truly believe that. They think that they believe we are behind Republicans, that Republicans have the advantage when it comes to media information infrastructure. So they're looking for ideas to try to challenge that, I think. And no, it's interesting the way both sides see each other. And I notice that more as somebody who is now much more taking a critical eye and being more clear-eyed about both sides. And so it's not a solution, but it's my own observation.
Yep. Thank you for that, Michael. Drew, any ideas about how we can be less siloed?
Yeah, I think it's two. There's two ways I always kind of come back to. One is, as Mark alluded to, I think when you have alternative forms of media that are not deliberately partisan in one direction or another, or at least willing to broker honest conversations, I think you advance that a little bit. I always have the thought, though, that, and maybe this is, I'm being too much of like a mushy optimist, but I do think at some point, with the right incentives, with the right information, there have to be media outlets who say, if we have more people in the room who just think a little bit differently from us, and we don't hound them out of this office on day one or day two or day three, we will have a better product. And so what I try and spend a lot of time doing is basically holding up a mirror to the media and saying, hey, you guys did this poorly. And I think in the hindsight of time, or in the hindsight of reflection, or given new information, it should be really, really obvious for you to do that. And I hope upon hope that at some point, eventually, if nothing else, one of these places will see that there is a profit incentive to say, if we can just do this a little bit better than CNN and MSNBC and NBC and the New York Times, people will come to us, because I think the demand is there. That's mushy, and that's optimistic, but
yeah, I will say, and I know you unconsciously said I always come back to two ways. That's what you said, but you really sort of meant two way. I'm so proud of our platform, because the conversation we're having right here, literally not taking place anywhere else in the media today. Literally, it's just not. So it's why I'm so optimistic that we're going to succeed, because there are people on this platform who are far left and far right who come every day. They watch both my shows every day, because this is not on offer any other place. I'm hoping, amongst other things, that we set an example. And so on CNN, Scott Jennings is not there to have conversations of understanding. Scott Jennings is on CNN so he can have fights with liberals and have viral moments where they talk past each other and yell at each other. This what we're doing here, there just needs to be more of it, and they need to be able to see it's a successful business, because right now they're afraid of trying anything beyond what is a moderately successful but declining business, which is just catering to one side. Pete, thank you for your question. Bring your mom. We may have to change the rules and not let you come unless you bring your mom. That could be a special rule just for Pete. Evan, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Good backdrop. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind for our two marquee guests.
Sorry, I'm in Long Island, and my question was, you talked a lot about Jimmy Kimmel and Kamala, and I guess this is all part of your background as a journalist and news producer. When you create a rundown, you basically determine what do you think. I assume it's what do you think people are going to be interested in, which or watch, or I guess the current iteration of that is what generates clicks. And I guess I just don't know people that I deal with care about Jimmy Kimmel, and they may care about the overall issue about canceling. I think most people care about that, but specifically Jimmy Kimmel, because I don't know anybody who watches him. And then the second thing is, I don't perceive, and I don't know anyone who perceives Kamala as a real entity of importance. And the people I know who are on the right desperately hope that Kamala's in the race, because they think that makes it a slam dunk for the other side. So I guess my question is, what am I missing? Because you obviously have made a career of determining a feel for these things. So what am I missing about the two of them?
Well, Kimmel, I won't read you my whole Daily Mail piece, but I recommend it to you because I run through why I think it's significant. Part of it is the using it as a prism to understand the moment we're in regarding the reaction to Charlie Kirk, and the moment we're in more broadly of how the two sides view this case as a case study in hypocrisy and division. It's not the most important story in the world. And I agree with you. I don't know anybody who watches the show either, and not many people do. But now, last I checked, I think like 10 million people had watched the YouTube video. So there's some interest in the story. Second, on the vice president, she was vice president. And you said what's important or what's interesting. I always say it's what's interesting and what's important. And in this case, it's mildly important, but it's very interesting to at least some people. And I find you don't always get it right. I don't always get it right in terms of what people are interested in, but we also have data, and we know what people on this platform respond to, and that's part of the calculus as well, because we want to give people what they're interested in. So there are people here on this platform who are interested in both those stories. Either of you guys want to say anything about what Evan asked?
Yeah, just to your second point, Mark, I think on the Harris stuff, the other thing that's interesting there, similar to the Kimmel stuff, is that it's a prism, right? Like you're able to look through that and think about like what the Democratic Party is going through right now. And I think a lot of people are very interested in that, and whether or not they're bottoming out and going to figure it out, whether or not there's still bottom left to hit, and then how the movers and shapers in that party are trying to understand what might come next. So that'd be my 2 cents. Maybe I'm just DC brained, but.
Real quick. So my old network, MSNBC, where I was a TV producer for about 7 years, they had a big exclusive with the vice president the other night, and it was her first TV interview since she lost. That makes sense. I get why you want an exclusive, because she was the former vice president, and you have to keep in mind what the President Biden did to her, the position he put her in is something that no president in our history has ever put a vice president in. They've never been in that position ever. It was historic what Biden did, that getting out of a race less than 2 months before voting started, a month before the convention, that it was unheard of. And first of all, we should all want to know, for history and for the public discourse, we should want to know what the hell took place, but Democrats definitely should, so we can avoid, acknowledge the mistakes and errors. But the interesting about that Maddow interview that MSNBC got the rights for, the next morning, nothing. Morning Joe for the entire first 2 hours, and I don't know if they did for the next two, didn't mention it. They didn't even mention the big exclusive on their own network the night before. They didn't touch it. It was all Kimmel. All Kimmel.
I noticed.
And
I noticed the same thing.
Speaks volumes.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing. Evan, thank you for coming on. Grateful to you. Gentlemen, I want to ask you about Kimmel. Do you think the story is over? He's back on the air. Story's not over. So, Drew, what do you think will happen next on Kimmel?
Well, according to the New York Times, he is now a champion for the First Amendment. And so what I think will continue to happen with Kimmel is that he will be seen as a vector for whether or not we're slipping into authoritarianism, where comics get arrested or whatever, or something else. So I think the Kimmel story struck a nerve. I think it will continue to strike a nerve. I think that the president will likely be a dog with a bone on this one, because he doesn't seem to like Mr. Kimmel. And so I think there will continue to be interest and appetite in this until there's a new crisis, probably.
Michael, I agree. I think that, though, I believe that the rules of capitalism don't suspend just because there's a new administration or because there's a changed administration. I think Disney should do what's best for Disney. That's how I feel. I had a debate with Stephen Hayes the other night about this. They should do. You're seeing all these Sinclair networks drop Kimmel. So that's the other reason why I think that this story is going to keep going, and because of what it represents, this alleged fight over the First Amendment. Yep,
gentlemen, love having you on. Thank you. Sorry the format was a little unorthodox. Hope you'll continue to come back regularly. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, Thank you, Mark. Right now, turn over to Bridget Fetisi. Her show her show's on 7 Eastern Time, Real America with Bridget Fetisi. It's on the topic of faith. Please watch Bridget. If you've never watched Bridget tonight, should be the night you sample it. 9 a.m. tomorrow, I'll be back with Sean and Dan for the morning meeting. There's lots of things percolating out there, so we'll have a good discussion with all the latest news. And then on Next Up tomorrow, amongst my guests, Patty Solis-Doyle, Democratic strategist, one of the smartest people I know, ton to talk to her about. And my reported monologue is going to be on leadership in the face of what we're going through right now in both parties. And then 23 hours from now, I'll be right back here with you all for another edition of this program. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of the community. Thank you for believing in what we're doing. I'll see you at 9 a.m. Have a good night.